I'm Dr. Howie Jacobson, and this is the Plant Yourself Podcast. Each week, I bring you a conversation with someone who's making a positive difference in the world. And for my day job, I help leaders and their teams master their mindsets so they can achieve great things. To find out more, check out the Mindset Mastery Memo, my Substack newsletter. You can find it at plantyourself.com/memo. And now, today's show. So when do you take risks in life? And when is it a good idea? And when is it just stupid? Today's guest, Sarah Davis, knows a lot about risk. She's a professional risk manager, which in my mind was always like a bean counter who was just cautioning against everything, like avoid all risk at whatever cost possible. But she's also an adventurer. And one of the things she did, and we talk a lot about in this conversation, is she was the first woman to paddle the Nile River all the way from the headwaters in Central Africa all the way north to the Nile Delta. And that involved a huge amount of risk, but also risk management. So today we're going to talk about the balance between caution and risk, between doing things boldly and playing it safe, and how you can live a life that you're going to look back on without regret. So I hope you really enjoy it. Without further ado, Sarah Davis, welcome to the Plant Yourself Podcast.
Hey, Howie. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, I couldn't not after finding out about you and your story. Basically, so we were just chatting before we hit record, and could you kind of repeat your tagline just as a frame?
So I describe myself as a professional risk manager with a passion for risk taking.
Gotcha. So on the one hand, they both sound like on the same side, but on the other hand, when I think about risk management and risk managers, I very often think about, bean counters, people who are trying to prevent any sort of risky behavior or activity. And yet, so there's this dynamic balance that has the word risk on both sides, but they're very, very different beasts. Maybe let's get started, and we're going to go into like crazy risk stories and adventure, but maybe we can start in a bit of a tame way. How did you get into risk management?
Well, yeah, risk management, we definitely can be seen as the fun place. You're totally right there. It's not something I think anyone has ever said, when I grew up, I want to be a risk manager. I think everyone's kind of fallen into it somehow. So I did a degree in physiology and got to the end of that and had no idea what I wanted to do. I think to a certain extent, I'm still trying to work out what I want to be when I grow up. But anyway, and I felt like, well, I'm good with numbers. And I'd seen some of the films and things of dealing rooms. And I thought, well, that looks like a fun environment. And like I say, good with numbers. Let's see if I can get into that.
And dealing room for our American audience was it like, are we thinking like Wolf of Wall Street?
Wolf of Wall Street, yes. So yeah, think Wolf of Wall Street. I look at that and go, oh, that looks like fun. It's that kind of hectic environment, and there's potential money making opportunities. So I kind of bullshitted my way in to a certain extent. So I had to lie about my A-level results because I didn't do particularly well in maths. Even I knew I could have done. I had a bad day, right? So I was like, oh, well, it's a lie, but it's not. And it was the good old days when you didn't have everything recorded on the good old wide web. So you could lie about these things. So I lied about that and managed to get in as a dealing room assistant and then ended up on one of the dealing desks. And it was a little bit Wolf of Wall Street. This is back in the early to mid 90s. It was hectic, but I love that environment. Like, it was fierce, but it was fun. You're playing, there's practical jokes happening. There's people playing pitch and putt down the dealing room. You're being shouted at. It's chaos.
And what were you trading? What were you dealing?
So I was a spot dealer's assistant. So I wasn't actually trading. I was a dealer's assistant. So spot foreign exchange thing for it. So we were on this really does show how far long ago it was. It was the Deutschmark yen that was the trader I was working with. And it just it got shouted at an awful lot. It was incredibly stressful at times. There'd be these very concentrated, super stressful periods, and then sort of a bit of a lull in between. So I did that for a little bit, realised I was never going to be a spot trader. And then went on to a sales desk and did that for a little while. So that was money market sales. And again, I could just see, like, I'm not a salesperson. That's not my personality. And I was, sitting next to somebody who was an incredible salesperson. And then I was out one day at lunchtime, bumped into my former boss who'd originally employed me, and he was working in market risk at another bank. And I said, like, I was thinking about what's next for me. And long story short, he offered me a job working in market risk, and that was my first step into risk management.
So when he said market risk, did you know what he was talking about?
Not really. But I was like, okay, well, I'm good with numbers. I'm quite analytical. He gave me a bit of a brief about it. I was like, well, I don't really know, but if he thinks he knows me, if he thinks I can do it, okay, let's give it a go. And I enjoyed the work. The work was definitely far more suited to me, but I just didn't like the environment because it was just the tap, tap, tap of keys on a board. And I liked that noisy background. So it was kind of like the environment wasn't really what I wanted, but the work was a lot better. And I stuck with it. So I spent many years doing market risk management and ended up at National Australia Bank, and long story short, they shipped me out to Australia, and that was sort of one of the next big moves for me.
So I'm trying to picture, because my sense of trading floors comes from these very macho movies that generally have anti-heroes, and there's an undercurrent of like the kind of the moral decay that underlies the whole system. And also you're talking about, so I'm trying to understand, like, when you're making decisions about yen or Deutschmark, you're not looking necessarily at global political events. You're looking at, like, minute to minute, right? You're just trying to shave off a little bit of margin. You're trying to do some arbitrage because someone knows something here that they don't know over there yet. It's before the computers, could do these trades in a fraction of a second. And then and risk management, market risk sounds like you're looking very much at what do the German elections look like in 9 months, and what is the effect that going to have on the wheat sector, right? Am I getting this right? That one was like extremely narrow sliced and the other was extremely wide focused?
Absolutely, yeah. When you're doing the foreign exchange, it's minute to minute, and economic figures are coming out, and it's reacting to those, or you're seeing customer flows coming through, or you're hearing rumors, and it's always buy the rumor, sell the fact. And it was very, very dynamic, very fast moving. And then yes, going into market risk was you're looking at a longer time frame. Some of it you're just doing your end of day, looking at the end of day positions. What are they running? Have any limits been broken during the day? But then also looking at some of those longer fundamentals and writing commentaries and reports. I mean, obviously the dealers are doing that, the economists are doing that, but then we're looking at it from a market risk perspective. So it was pretty interesting. It could be interesting.
And did you have a preference stylistically in terms of like this long-term big picture basket of data to analyze versus like, moment to moment rumors and facts?
Yeah, I need time. I'm someone who takes information, then makes a decision and then comes back. So that super, super fast moving was definitely didn't really suit me. And, I realized that very early on. I was on that trading desk when I was about, 21, 22, but I could see that really wasn't going to be the path for me. It just didn't suit me and my personality, and I am more of a thinker than being super, super reactive. So yeah, it suited me more and more analytical.
Okay. Now, while you were having this business career, you also had a parallel life as an athlete.
Yeah, so I was a runner. I got into long distance running, and that was, I did a bit of triathlon in the UK, and I did my first marathon was the London Marathon. And then when I came out to Australia, it really sort of went up a level a little bit. And I think it's the environment here. You know, people are super fit, super active, super outdoors. The weather definitely helps with that compared to the UK. And yeah, I started really getting into the sort of half marathon, and then did another marathon up in Singapore, and was really, really enjoying that, and really kind of defined myself as a runner at that time.
What's your PR?
They're not super impressive. So I did just a 92-minute half and a 3:38 marathon, and I really felt I was on track to definitely break the 3:30 in the marathon, and that was my next big target. But I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my right hip we worked it out, we think it's from falling off horses as a kid. So when it came to sport, horse riding was my first love. And I don't know, I tended to make horses a bit nutty sometimes. And so I had a couple of falls, and I remember landing on my right hip on some pretty hard ground. So that set up the arthritis, and they said no more long distance running. So I was like, okay. And so then I brought it back down. So okay, let's try and go do the 10K and see if I can break. I'd done, I think, 42-minute 10Ks. So let's see if we can break the 40 minutes. And we have this great race here in Sydney, City to Surf, which is a 14K sort of fun run. And I blew my meniscus in that. And that was back in 2012. And I had about 40% of it shaved off its back before they were actually sort of repairing them. And that was the end of my running. And I was absolutely devastated. Like I said, I'd wrapped some of my identity around it. And so suddenly I lost some of my identity. And then I missed it. There's this beautiful run from Bondi to Bronte, and I'd drive past and I'd see all these people running. And I was literally going to be crying because it's like, I just wanted to run. So I found it really hard, but I knew, one door shuts and another one will open, and I was just sort of sitting there going, I really want this other door to open kind of quickly. And eventually it did, and I'd already started doing a little bit of surf ski paddling, so that sort of kayaking in the surf and the ocean, and that ended up sort of becoming then my next main sport.
So when you were, and I'm asking this as a runner who has run myself into injuries that feel like it's the end of the road for any sort of competitive running, were you applying principles of risk management to your running, or like?
Yes, and then my ego would take over and my competitive nature would take over, and then I would do dumb stuff. It's the reason why I've never done CrossFit, because it's like, I know my personality is just don't do it, Sarah. It's like that would be ridiculous. When I blew my meniscus, I went into it with a slight injury, and I was like, don't go hard. And I'm like, I'm just going to do it easy. I had a few years out as a personal trainer, and I had some clients. It's like, yeah, just go easy. The gun went, and just something inside me just went. I'm like, no, gotta hammer it. And then my meniscus went. And it's like, oh. So, yes, in theory, yes. In practice, no. It's a very good question.
I had my PR for a marathon was 3:51. I was aiming for 3:30 because I wanted to Boston qualify, and I was it was a very flat race. And after about 8 miles, I realized I could see the 3:15 group ahead, and I caught up with them. And then I realized I could see the 3-hour group ahead of them, and I caught up with them. And by mile 17, I could barely walk. So I threw away 3:30, chasing 3.
Oh yeah, I can very much relate to that.
So.
Oh, and so do you run now? Do you still run? Do you say you don't know?
I had stopped. Just every time I'd go for a jog out here on the roads, it would hurt. So now I'm just doing beach stuff. I'm running on sand. which is incredibly humbling because I'm so slow.
It's brutal.
You know, I would do 5-6 miles before I was tired as 5 minutes on sand. But I don't wake up, a pretzel that has to be untwisted every morning. So you're talking about these sort of dynamic tensions between, like being very sober risk manager, setting up these plans, and then like, fuck it, the gun goes off and I'm going to just go, chase the rabbit. And you have this dual career in business around, the thrill of the momentary deal and the clacking and the facts coming in, and this long-term sober analysis. And all throughout is this thing like, this isn't really the life that I'm meant to live, right? Like I fell into it. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty good at it, or I'm very good at it, but still it's not exactly my thing. How did that, which I can imagine is sort of like the 3 a.m. thought, gets real, like a balloon blows up real big at 3 a.m, but you can kind of ignore it for most of the waking hours. How did that begin to factor into the rest of your life? And how did that grow into something that needed attention?
I mean, it was something I knew was there for quite a long time, and I kept sort of, trying different things. So I took voluntary redundancy at one point, went traveling around the world, came back, as I mentioned, was a personal trainer, had a few years as a personal trainer, realized that wasn't it. Went back into banking, had a great job at Macquarie Bank. I then moved into operational risk, and I'd done a lot of project management. And it was at that point, it's like, okay, this is as good as corporate's going to get. Like, great organization, great ethos there, loved it. But it was still this, it's not right. And I knew I couldn't settle, and I knew I had to do something about it. And it's not easy when you don't know what you want to do, and it's a discomfort that isn't so bad that you can't live with it. When you've got a very nice life, living the dream in Bondi, as I say, good, well-paid job, great friends, surf club, all of that stuff. But I knew I would regret it if I didn't do something. And I got to a point where it was a New Year's morning, 2016. And I come off the back of a year where I'd come out of a friendship which had been very toxic. Had sort of been semi-seeing someone that was all finished. So sort of ended the year a little bit emotionally bruised, but then was looking at this blank canvas in front of me. And the sun came up that morning. I get up to watch the sun come up on New Year's Day. It's kind of my thing these days. Party day is very much behind me. And I decided it was time to make a change, and I had to do something. At that point I can't do the math, early 40s, let's call it. And I wanted to make a change. And I knew I would regret it if I didn't. And so I just made it a real effort to work out what it is I wanted to do next. And
you decided?
I decided to paddle the Nile, as you do, because it's like, it's an unusual midlife crisis to have.
Uh-huh.
So the thing is, I was looking at what it was I wanted. So I just say a little bit more where it kind of came from, because it is a bit of a jump from New Year's morning to paddling the Nile. I saw a couple of people who'd gone on sort of adventures expeditions, and I read so many books about adventurers and explorers. It had never occurred to me that was something I could do. I'd gone on, yes, very adventurous holidays, but sort of that more organized thing. And these were just two people who just looked like ordinary people. Like everyone I'd seen before that had been, I don't know, you felt like they'd been doing it since they were kids, that they'd been brought up or they'd done, ex-military, all of those sorts of things. So when I saw these two people, it massively sparked something in me. And, one, it was like, oh my goodness, that's what I want to do. And two, most importantly, this is something I could do. And I wanted to do something paddling. Like I said, I'd got into the surf ski stuff, and And I was looking for something that hadn't really been done before. This hadn't been done by a woman, full from source to sea. So my ego quite like that, and I decided, and I just loved Africa. Like, it had been a go-to continent for holidays, and it was there was no, oh, is this the right thing? Isn't it? It was a very visceral response, like with every cell in my body. It's like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do. I've got no idea how, but this is it. And I knew, this isn't the long-term change necessarily. It's something to do for a period of time, but I just was like, yeah, this is it.
And so you had been surf sea kayaking. So like you knew there were these bodies of water that people were navigating in kayaks and rafts. So what about the Nile? Was that the one that had not been done by a woman yet?
They hadn't, not from the source. I mean, mind you, the source is sort of still hotly debated, but not from sort of Rwanda to the end in Egypt. Spoiler alert: I didn't actually manage to do all of it, but at that point, yeah, no one had. There'd been women who'd gone from Uganda in a crew to the Mediterranean, but from that stretch earlier, no.
And had men done it?
Yes. Yeah, so a crew that did from Uganda to Egypt had done it. They'd used engine for some of it, but then they'd gone back and done from Rwanda to Uganda. Years and years ago, there was a chap, oh, and it's terrible, I've got the book behind me here somewhere. A chap had done a source to sea, like a long time ago. So yes, it had been done by a guy before.
So one of the things I realized I was completely clueless about before I read the book, and the book is called
Paddle the Nile.
I had, so like the big, I think that's like in men's and women's sports, it would be a matter of strength and stamina and size. And reading the book, it turns out, at least from my perspective, that the challenge in doing it as a woman was all the other people who treated you differently than they would have treated a man. That it wasn't the paddling so much as the inherent gender inequalities and assumptions that followed you most of the way.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, because people have said to me, it's like, oh, do you think it was harder to do as a woman? And I felt actually in a lot of ways I was more protected. I mean, there were definitely times where I didn't feel protected, but that people were generally trying to make me safe and look after me generally. But there were definitely, a lot of threats there. Things like dealing with a general threat of kidnap, and then there were some specific ones where we did have some slight concerns. Was that gender-based? Not necessarily. I don't think. It's more, that would be more opportunistic-based. What I've been seen potentially as being a softer target, maybe. But yeah, for me, I think that the hardest thing, and I knew it would be going into it, would be the mental challenge. That it was, it's mentally, there's monotony to deal with. There's times of boredom. There is constant problem solving. It's dealing with very high pressurized situations, which I'm not that great at. You go back to that time being sitting on the desk in the foreign exchange desk and going, I'm not great in these super high pressured situations. And now I was in them in a very, very physically dangerous situation. I knew that was going to be, and it was very challenging. And yeah, it's just that constant problem solving, and yeah, it was very much a mental challenge.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking about all the people, the men who offered to marry you and give you babies, and the men who refused to talk to you but only spoke through your crew, or didn't acknowledge you as a human being. And here you are, like doing this from my perspective, this incredibly powerful, strong, brave thing, for women, like showing what a woman can do. And there you were along the way, having to like show the kind of constraint that you describe as sort of coming very difficult to you.
Yeah, it's interesting because yes, you're absolutely right, and I don't know whether I don't know why I don't think about that so much when I reflect on it. Was some of those things, those aren't the stronger memories. I don't know whether it's also, when it was definitely dialed up there with the way some of the women are treated and viewed, but then you get some of that in all societies. So maybe I'm unfortunately so used to it I don't notice it as much, and that would be tragic.
Right. So one of the things I was doing as I was reading the book was putting myself in your shoes and imagining what this would have been like for me, what that would have been like, what would have been relatively easy to deal with, what would have been unbearable. And the fantasy that I have is that the physical challenges would have been fine. I don't think that's true, but the body response was like, that's okay. But like where I would have fallen down or given up or gone apeshit crazy would have been the bureaucracy. And I'm like, maybe just tell a couple of stories about, because I'm reading it like shouting no into my Kindle as.
Oh, there was so many, and you're doing you're working on African time and the African way of doing things. Just that constantly trying to get approvals and not being able to find out exactly what that looks like and who I need to speak to. Just getting the approvals to go to the source was incredibly challenging, and I literally got them the day before, and then trying to get my visa, and someone who said that they were going to be able to organize my visa for Sudan, and then they didn't, and I'm delaying flights, and then having to find someone else to get them, to then out of Khartoum in Sudan, trying to get the guys are working so hard to try and sort of support me and get me going, but everything just took so much time. And then you go through Egypt, and the police are like, no, they trying to keep me safe, which was great, but then it's like, no, you can't stay there, you've got to stay here. And it was just this constant battle. It really was a constant battle.
Yeah, so like when I'm thinking about like the hardest things I've done, 50K races or mountain marathons, there's a point at which you're like, okay, my body's breaking, but my will is going to take over and I'm going to push through. And it can work, right? Up till the meniscus goes or the back goes or whatever. But there's, I'm also imagining like paddling is very much going with the flow, right? The way you described the rapids, like you're giving up control. Whereas dealing with bureaucracy again and again and again really feels like pushing, like like a very different energy. And I'm wondering how you, as a risk manager or as an adventurer or whatever, how do you think about, like there's certain things life gives me, and it's pretty clear, like I'm interpreting it as, no, don't do it. Life is telling you no. And I was having trouble distinguishing between, like to me, the bureaucratic no's would have felt like cosmic no's as opposed to, the physical challenges.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And there was this balance, like even just getting to the start. So I went over to Uganda to gather the crew. I mean, I didn't have the crew until I got there. But it wasn't working trying to organise it from Australia. And anyway, managed to engage some guys, commercial rafting guides from Uganda to join me. Within I was lent the equipment I needed from Nile River explorers, and then we organised a big people carrier to take us and everything we needed overland to Uganda, to Rwanda to the start. And that journey I think it was within a couple of hours, within a few hours, the car started to overheat and break down. And it was this just one thing after another with the cars breaking down and problems and issues. And yet there was this part of me going, is this some universal, some higher powers messaging me? Is it the final test? Do I really want this? Or is it the message? No, don't do it. So that was everything one, and I decided it was the final test, and I carried on. And then, yeah, you know, with the problems we had very early on through Rwanda, there was part of me going, am I being reckless continuing? And because I don't have the experience of this, and because of some of the threats that were there, and my lack of experience, I'd engaged a company to, one, be giving me, and this is where my risk management came in. Like, I did a massive risk assessment on the whole thing, identifying everything that could go wrong, which was very valuable because it helped me, it really put boundaries of what I was getting into. So there was an element of it gave me some confidence. But then also when you really do understand what could go wrong, it's quite scary as well. But I realized that there were some situations such as getting arrested, which in those countries is quite easy to do without doing anything wrong. It's almost a rite of passage if you're spending that much time in some of these places. I don't know the standard operating procedures to get out of that, and I didn't want to land my friends back here having to deal with that kind of a shit show. So I'd done hostile environment awareness training, and I engaged that company, and I was given this operator, Dave, who was amazing, and I checked in with him every day, and he gave me very detailed intel reports. And he was also there to deal with any crisis that came up. But what I also knew is that he would call me on it if I was potentially being reckless, or if it looked as though, look, I think we should really stop here. So I'd kind of outsourced that to someone objective. And it was, I mean, having him there was so valuable on many, many different things. But knowing that, and knowing that I'd be called on that, and having someone to bounce my decisions off with, who had experience with supporting these kind of endeavors, has a military background, that was just gold, absolute gold.
So when I think about, the way you describe using your risk management chops to think about, to think about everything that could go wrong, assess, worst case scenarios, and assess the relative probabilities of any of those things happening, and come up with contingency plans. It feels like there's something really inherently risky about that around unknown unknowns. Is there a discipline or a formula around okay, so I've thought of everything that can be thought of, but things are going to happen that I haven't thought of. How do I think about that?
Yeah, and it's the hardest one. The unknowns. It's just, you've got to be ready to react. And for me, that was about having the right people. So, having a very experienced rafting crew for that first section, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda, having Dave there, having people there that if those things came up, that I would then have the right people around me to deal with it. To have done as much training as I could, whether that be swiftwater rescue technician to first aid, to then hope, Krav Maga, that you would be able to then apply what you've learned, or the people you've got around you, or the equipment that you have, to the situations that come up, and just being ready to respond.
Gotcha. So one of the stories that I got very emotionally invested in was when your driver got arrested and you couldn't get the car keys back from the police. Could you tell that story?
So that was definitely one of the part of that whole, from reading it, the car, just one car problem after another. So it was the day we were supposed to be heading off to the source. So we got to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda. We'd overnighted there, and this was with the person who picked us up from the border and brought us to the hostel. And we left everything. It's like, no, leave everything in the car. It's going to be stored somewhere safe. Great. So we took what we needed, sleep. I wake up the next morning, and I get this text message from the driver going, "I've been arrested." I was like, you fucking what? So then I speak to my fixer who'd organised this, and she's like, okay, right, let's meet at the police station. So we get a taxi to the police station with all our stuff, and he's been arrested. He's there. He very sorry for himself, not a lot of sympathy. And we find out that the arresting officer had taken the car keys home with him when he clocked off that night. So the car's there, the driver's arrested. It's like, fine, we can find another driver, but we've got no keys to get in the car. And it's just, oh my God, like, seriously, people. But it's one of those things, you just got to, you know, my mantra for this trip was control the controllables. And it was like, okay, we will find a way around it somehow. And eventually, we got the keys, and then we were able, because we were looking at, do we get another car? And then do I drive it? And I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do that. But eventually they got the keys. We got another driver. I can't remember, that was driver number 4 or 5 by that point, in about our 4th car. And we were then able to head off, although that wasn't the end of the car problems that we had. But anyway.
Yeah, and another one of the, I guess, the mantras, is TIA, right? This is Africa.
Yeah.
And, you know, I lived in South Africa for a year, and I remember learning this lesson again and again and again, where I would freak out about things that people who, you know, Africans, just like, okay, that's like I had this, it was almost like I started realizing it's this sense of entitlement that I had, that things should go my way. Right? This kind of rage that I was not being treated, you know, according to my worth, my due, my station. And, you know, and like, how can these countries function like this? How can these societies, and in the end, it really, you know, mellowed me to kind of seeing that there's this whole other way of looking at it that turns out to be much more psychologically healthy and reality based.
Absolutely. Yeah, you put it really well. And it's so true. You know, I went there as the project manager who'd be like, okay, we have everything signed off and we're ready to go, and da da da. And then you go there and you've just got to, you know, you kind of walk in the way appears, you know, taking the Rumi quote. And you just have to trust on that. And then when things do go wrong, just sort of, it's that it will all come, you know, almost, it'll come right when it's supposed to. And you've just got to trust and keep moving forward, and things will just, yeah, the way just it appears. And at first it's really confronting, because it's like, well, no, I want to know when it's going to be sorted and how it's going to be sorted and all of this. I think, you know, to your point. And then, yeah, you realize that's just not the way it works there. And in some ways it just works better, and things can get done that wouldn't otherwise. You know, we lost this glue that had got broken and needed to get some replacement glue. And they're like, yeah, it's fine. So they put a pot of glue on a bus. It gets sent to Kigali, overland on this bus. I'm like, there's no way it's going to get there. And then the fixer, someone who works for the fixer, manages to get that from Kigali and finds us on the river. It's just like the most random thing of like, things just work. And you're like, I don't know how this just happened, but things just work. It's, yes.
Yeah.
So I become a lot more laid back about things, and you realise, yeah, it should be right, mate. You had a bit of Australian, should be right, mate.
and you write very self-reflectively about the glue breaking, right? And, you know, sort of like blaming the driver, at least with a look or with a tone of voice, and then realizing that your unmanaged reaction had made things worse, right? That had reduced the positive resources that you had to get this accomplished. And I'm wondering, was that sort of a lesson around how you were going to change as a result of this trip?
Yeah, I mean, I know I can be sort of reactive in the moment, and it's just that this initial and then calm down. And it was just that, yeah, when that glue broke, and I thought I was quite constrained, but yeah, apparently not for them. You know, again, you've got the cultural differences, and that put everyone on tenterhooks, and no one spoke for a long period of time. And I don't like to put people in that situation. It was an accident. And I hadn't really appreciated the kind of situation it had put people in, because I was just grumpy in the back of the car. And it was just more opening my eyes to the impact that I will have, and just being more aware of the cultural differences and a lot of the dynamics that were at play. But, obviously I was in quite a heightened, situation, and quite stressed with the whole thing. I'm coming into this expedition, and I am, I'm shitting myself. I'm excited, but I'm also like, what the hell am I doing? I must be out of my tiny little mind.
So one of my myths that got corrected fairly quickly in the book was I figured, paddling the Nile, that would take like 10 to 14 days in my imagination. Right? Like that's what people do when they go on river trips. It's like, okay, there's the river, it's flowing. And then I'm reading the section headers, day 116 to 129. Like,
you're thinking, she must be really slow.
What is she, a man? She won't ask directions? Like, what the hell is happening here? It only flows one way. How lost can you get? I know Africa is like a big place, but it really didn't occur to me that this was going to be like an epoch of human time. Like this is a stretch of your life. This isn't just a vacation.
No, and I knew it was going to be probably around that 6-month mark. So it's over 6,600 and so kilometers. So that's about 4,000. So I am looking on the screen. 4,100 miles. I did have to miss a bit of a lumpy section, and then that was made up by the time it took to organize getting going, because I was doing do a section, finish organizing the next bit, then do the next section, get approvals in place. Like it was, because I didn't have a team and shed loads of money to throw at it to have that all organized for me, or people supporting. It just meant that there was that stop start, but in so many ways, that's it for me. That was better. It was an experience. If I'd had a whole team just sort of sorting it all out, there would have been a lot. I mean, yes, it would have been a lot less stressful, but I would have missed out a lot on the the time it took to get going. Say in Sudan, both times, I got to build amazing friendships and get to spend time with the extraordinary people of the rowing and canoe club there. And I would have missed out hugely if I'd had, teams of people to organise all of this for me, because it was so much more than just this paddling the length of the Nile. It was so much more than that. It was about the adventure, and it was about the experiencing these countries. It's one of the joys of doing something like this, and whether it's a river trip or a cycling trip, you're going at a speed that you can cover reasonable distance, but you're totally immersed in those countries. And doing it from a river, it's a very quite a unique perspective and a way of seeing a country that a lot of people don't. And certainly these, the countries I went through, yes, people, I think a lot of people do the Egypt section, but the other countries, less so, or certainly for not this length of time.
Yeah. So when you were planning this and ideating it and dreaming and risk managing it, did you have a goal beyond I'm going to get from point A to point B in terms of like who you would be or what you would experience or how you would grow?
I had no idea. I just knew that this would be, my purpose for this period of time. And it was for the 2 years it took me to organise it, and the 6 months I was there. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I will come through it and it will be like a midlife crisis and I get over it and I decide, actually, I'm really happy and with the life that I had before, or it's going to create a shift in me, which is what I was kind of expecting, and would make me want to go and do different things. And I was happy to go into it sort of not knowing what that result was going to be, but I knew that this was the right thing for now.
And looking back, what did it give you, that you're still harvesting?
Definitely a bigger comfort zone. So my comfort zone definitely expanded somewhat. from being out of it for such a long period of time. Self-confidence, definitely. That belief that, everything is figure-outable, to start working towards these huge goals, to really focus, the importance of just focusing on what you can and can't control, and learning to not stress about those things that are way out of your control. If you've accepted the situation, of whatever it is, it's then accepting, you've done everything you can, you've done your preparation, you go with it. And then when things go wrong, it's that you're working out what your response is going to be, because that's all you can really control. You might be able to influence a few other things, but that is it. And I think I got a lot better at that.
And how does that feel and show up in everyday life when you're not dealing with murderous hippos and potential kidnappers?
I think I'm a lot more chill. I did go back into a corporate role, and I did some contracting and then did some other things. And I think having been faced with what was some genuine life and death situations, and I'd been in corporate roles where it felt like it was life or death, and it felt a lot more serious than I think that things really were. Like, my life was not on the line. But it definitely felt like that. Coming back with that, having experienced the life and death, I was able to get a better perspective when dealing with stressful situations at work. I think I do. I don't get so worked up about things, and that sort of control the controllables, and it is what it is. I think that's something I've carried forward, and I do have to keep reminding myself of it. There are times when I will lose it a little bit. It's like, no, we've got to bring that back. And the perspective of just feeling, a lot of appreciation and gratitude for the life I have.
So I'm really interested in this, the neurological perception, where you could say, you have the same reaction in a work environment where you're surrounded by, very peaceful mammals who aren't going to try to attack you, and yet your threat alarms are right. And you talk about. I'm going to read a little bit that I highlighted from near the beginning of the book. It says, physiologically and mentally, we react differently depending on whether we view a situation as either a threat or a challenge. If you see it as a threat, you're on the back foot. You don't want to be there. Blood leaves the periphery, reducing anaerobic power. Your thinking gets fuzzy, and your decision-making skills take a dive. When you look at something as a challenge, the blood pumps to your muscles. You're on the attack. You're focused in a positive emotional state. It facilitates better decision-making and effective cognitive functioning. You believe you can meet the demands of the situation. And they're both fight or flight in a way, but they're also very different from each other.
Absolutely. And it's, it's trying to keep in that challenge mode for as long as possible. And that's, that I knew coming into it that was something I was going to struggle with, which is why, I had a look at things like that and come across that concept of reframing. Like, how can you reframe something from being a threat to a challenge, knowing that then you can potentially deal with it a lot better and be more responsive as opposed to reactive. And that's definitely something I've taken forward. I think it's just when you don't have a frame of reference, if your frame of reference is sort of limited to those high stressful, it's a corporate situation or different situations, that's your 1 to 10. 10 being the worst. You then go and stretch yourself, and for me the stretch was going in these sort of life-threatening situations. My 10 is very different now. So what was previously a 10 is now maybe a 5. And it's like, no one's going to die here. It's okay. So yeah, that's definitely an approach I've taken forward from that reframing as well.
Does that affect your physiology if you're in a meeting that used to be a 10 and is now a 5?
I don't know if it'd change. Yeah, I mean, potentially, yes. There's would be slightly. It's less panicked. There's less stress, less anxiety. It's okay, yeah, we've got to get this done, but it's the emotions that go with it are different.
And I imagine that gives you more responsiveness, more a wider, a broader palette of responses and potentially more collaborative and creative ones.
Yes, yeah, and it's so true. You can definitely be more creative when you're responding to a situation than coming from that very emotive sense. It's mentally, I think, and cognitively quite narrowing. It's more expansive when you're able to be in that, whether it's a challenge mode or you're just not taking it as quite such a threat.
So, which reminds me a lot of my work around helping people sort of map their worlds. And a lot of people's maps have lots of dragons in them and, in your case, crocodiles and hippos. And they bring them, that a sideways glance or a tone of voice or an email can conjure up, right, these 10s that really are, objectively speaking, 2s or 3s and 5s at the most. And I wonder what's your work now around helping people share the lessons that you learned through, your life, your career, and the 6 months of paddling the Nile?
For me, I mean, it's around encouraging people to embrace risk, but taking things from being, and it's definitely not telling everyone to go and paddle down the Nile, but that living a bigger life, living boldly, living intentionally, getting out of comfort zones, doing new things. I think it's, and I know from my own experience, it's very easy to get into a comfortable life and a comfortable routine, but we can just end up with that kind of unconscious existence. And what I want to do and what I do is it's trying to encourage people to break out of that and getting out of comfort zones and making that a familiar place. Like at the beginning of the year, I went to Oman and I went solo bikepacking through Oman. And it was beautiful. I had a month there, and it was out of my comfort zone, which I knew it was going to be. That was fine. But I realized it wasn't as familiar a place as it used to be. And I know that can then create getting out of comfort zone. It makes it more of a hurdle if it's not as familiar. So I set myself a little quest that when I turned 52, which was at the end of July, that I would do 52 things that take me into the unknown, the uncertain, and the uncomfortable over the space of a year. So I'm calling them Gulps. I am writing a book at the moment, Gulp, How to Embrace Risk and Live Boldly. And it's not super big things. Like the first one was a sunrise to sunset walk unplugged in one of the national parks here. So no music, no audio podcasts or anything. I've had to go at trapeze. I'm scared of heights, so that was quite entertaining. Most recently I went speed dating. That's a few hours of my life I won't get back. But that was really interesting because off the back of that, I then have conversations with people and telling them the stories from it and just laughing about it. One potential business opportunities come up and then, your brain tries to make connections and you can go, okay, well that approach there, I could see how that could be applied to that problem there. So I've got this business idea or, workshop that I could run, not related to dating. But it's just that, when you go and do different things, you've got no idea where things can take. And it's like, I definitely didn't walk away with my future husband, which I wasn't expecting to. But, did come away with some different, some ideas and some interesting conversations. What else have I done? You'll like this one at the moment. I am vegan for the week. So I am very much a carnivore, but I am vegan for the week. So I am, a few days into that. trying that. So it's a real mix of things. I had a tech fast, so I did 24 hours I did use my microwave and air fryer, but otherwise, no phone, no TV, no computer. Another week I did getting up at 4:30 every day for a week and getting in the water. So it's in the middle of winter here. I mean, it's Australian winter, but we're still pretty fresh. So it's just lots of different things. Another week I did doing 3 hours of movement and exercise a day, and it's just created this. I've got so much more out of it than I was expecting, because it's just creating this energy, and that sort of loving life. There are times I was like, I just don't want to go out. I went to a gig on my own on Friday night, and I'm like, going out at 9 o'clock? I'm normally in bed by 9 o'clock, not going out. And I was like, drag myself there. And it's like, so you've just got to go there, have a little dance, and then you can come home. And I stayed there for the whole thing, and I loved it. And it was just being in a live music environment, which I haven't for such a long time, and feeling that, the reverberation, the bass through your chest. And I was like, oh my goodness, I've missed that. So I think it's so important that we can get so stuck in our ways at times in these routines, and we got to break out of them, because it just creates energy. And, life is for living. And I know I live in a very privileged part of the world, and my situation that I can do a lot, but that's what I like encouraging people to do, live life.
And do you come up with your gulps just by looking around, or you think of something and you think, oh God, no, and that's how you should do it? Like how do you orchestrate this plan?
Well, I had a chat with ChatGPT. Got a few ideas from ChatGPT. It was quite handy. Things that are on my fear list is that I'm really scared of heights. So there's a few height related ones, like abseiling, bungee, terrified of snakes. So there's a reptile park nearby, and you can do an adult keeper, like zookeeper sort of thing for the day, where apparently you get to hold snakes, which is just my idea of absolute hell. So there's some of those. But there's also fun things of like, what are things that I've always wanted to try? I've always wanted to have a go at pottery, something new. And, to actually spin the wheel thing. I've never done that before. So it's like, okay, let's go and try that. Improv. I mean, that I just really don't want to do that. But, it's like, okay, I'll go and do it. But a lot of people said you should go and do stand-up comedy, not because they think I'm particularly funny. I think they just want to see me fail terribly. I'm not sure I'll do that one, but I will consider doing improv. It's just it's a mix of things. It's not all facing absolute fears, and it doesn't have to be doing all terrifying things. But just doing new things. It's the unknown, the uncertain, the uncomfortable, and it's so far it's been a lot of fun. So I've come up with different ideas, and I'll talk to people. It's like, what do you think I should do? And someone's like, have you ever tried wing foiling? I was like, no, I haven't. It's like, oh, I'm going to do that. Awesome. Okay, thanks.
Have you tried what?
Wing foiling. Wing foiling, where you've got a sort of a foiling meets windsurfing, kind of in between the two. So I'm going to have a go.
I'm going to have to look that up. I'm not picturing it, but sounds terrifying.
No, it would be fun. I think I've got the right. Yeah, wing foiling. I have got the right terminology. So it's going to be a year of just trying different things and encouraging people to do the same. And I think the more you do it, yes, it's facing fears, and we find the tools that work for us. Whether it's a reframing something from a threat to a challenge, finding ways to compartmentalizing fear, breath work, meditation. Like, it's just, you gather the tools and then do things to put it into practice. And that's what I want to do, so that then, if I go and do more big adventures and expeditions, I've got this sort of toolkit of things that I've practiced using.
So I can imagine, I can hear myself thinking it, and I can imagine some listeners will think it like, I don't know that I could do these things. Like, I'm listening to your invitation to do some gulps, and I don't think so. I don't know. You write early on in the book, Paddle the Nile, one positive of self-doubt was the level of preparation it drove and the lack of complacency it created. So even there, you're reframing something that I would view as an internal signal not to do it, as the self-doubt becomes the due diligence driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be very easy that it's certainly, I've definitely been in situations where it stopped me, but it's like, okay, how can we fuel it? Use it to fuel. And I think it can be a positive. I would never say to someone that the goal is to be fearless, because I think if you're fearless, you're far more likely to be reckless. You're going to do something stupid. It's a tool to use and use it to channel. We channel that fear and find our way through it and use the self-doubt or whatever it is to fuel the preparation and build enough competence to create the confidence to take the next step.
I love it. So for folks who want to, read more Paddle the Nile, want to watch some videos, and want to follow you and your wisdom and be in the loop when Gulp comes out, where do they go?
So there's the website, Sarah J. Davis, and that's DAVIS.com.
And the Sarah has a H at the end.
Yes, it does. Yeah, sarahjdavis.com. So that's got my blogs, my newsletter. You can sign up for that, which comes out every 3 to 4 weeks. You're definitely not going to get spammed from that one. Where I share, my articles, my blogs, and also recommended podcasts and reading and ideas of things to do. On the website, I've got a page there under my adventures of my 52 Gulp. So I'm popping up videos and pictures there. More frequently, then there's Instagram, which is Sarah Paddles, as in paddling, Sarah Paddles. And then I'm also relatively active on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Okay. Are there links to all those other things at your website?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Sarah with an H, sarahjdavis.com. That'll take you everywhere else. Yep. When do you think Gulp will be on shelves or
I need to find the time. I need to find the time to write it. I'm thinking of actually doing a deck of cards, like a pack of cards with ideas of things to do as a kind of an interim to get people on the journey, and then with it as well, like sort of 10 cards of ideas of how to deal with its self-doubt and fears and things like that, how we can rate our fears and find ways to bring that rating down. So yeah, so there may be cards before the book, because it's just finding the time at the moment to write it all.
That's cool. I could see myself with a deck of cards starting a local Gulp club.
That would be awesome. That's what I would see, is like Gulp Club. Global Gulp clubs. That would be amazing.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, I'm so inspired, and you helped me think about things in a very sort of fun way around breaking through the stuck points that I hadn't even noticed because I've sort of settled into them. So I'm excited to continue to follow your work. I'm excited to share this, and I'm so grateful for your leadership and for the time you took today.
Oh, no, thank you so much. It's just been a great conversation. You've asked so many good questions, some real different ones. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been great to be on your show. Thank you.
A pleasure. We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.
And that's a wrap. Show notes at plantyourself.com/602. So fun weekend for movement. 2 things. One, there was the regionals, Ultimate Beach Regionals for Spain. My team, Bravas Cheetahs, which means spicy cool, came in 13th out of 13. But we had fun. We played with spirit, good spirit, and we learned a lot. And we have a very young team. In fact, some of the players were actually preteen, just kids who are learning the game, who are the next generation. And I pulled my back out a little bit on Saturday, went home, rested it, but I was able to come back on Sunday and play 2 games and had a lot of fun. And if you're a friend of mine on Facebook, you can go and see my team's photo in my the cover photo at the top of my Facebook page. The other thing was, what's today? Wednesday. Yes, Monday. evening, I went to the chiropractor, and there was a new chiropractor there who had a technique called ART, which I don't know what it is, but I remember, I guess the T is technique. And I remember reading about it years ago in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Body. And he did a little ART on my right IT band, and I was definitely looser afterwards. So it's very exciting because nothing else really has worked. Stretching hasn't worked, and strengthening the other muscles, the agonist and antagonist muscles hasn't really worked. So I'm looking forward to going back and getting some more ART, more physio, to see if we can loosen up these hips and give me a few more years of happy, fun running and ultimate playing and paddle and just walking and living. That's it for this week. As always, be well, my friends.